There is a law operating silently beneath every financial result you have ever experienced. It was present in moments of abundance, and it was equally present in moments of lack. It does not favor some people and punish others. It does not respond to hope, desperation, or effort alone. It responds to alignment. And once this law is truly understood, not memorized, not repeated, but integrated, money and prosperity stop feeling unpredictable. Most people believe that money comes from work, opportunity, or intelligence. These are secondary factors. They matter, but they are not primary. The primary cause is always internal. Earl Nightingale made this clear when he said that success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Bob Proctor expanded this truth by explaining that results are dictated by paradigms embedded in the subconscious mind. Quantum physics now confirms what both men intuited. Consciousness itself is causal. This is the law. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are aligned with. Alignment is the condition in which thought, emotion, belief, expectation, and identity are pointing in the same direction. When alignment exists, results feel natural. When it does not, effort increases and outcomes weaken. This is why so many intelligent, hardworking people feel stuck financially, while others move forward with less visible strain. The law never stops operating. It only reflects coherence or contradiction. Most financial struggle is born from contradiction. A person may consciously desire prosperity, while unconsciously identifying with survival. They may speak about abundance while emotionally preparing for disappointment. They may visualize wealth while feeling unsafe receiving it. These internal splits generate interference, and interference disrupts the signal sent into the quantum field. The quantum field does not interpret language. It responds to state, your dominant internal state. Especially when nothing external is happening, is what life responds to. That state is shaped by years of conditioning, repetition, emotional memory, and identity reinforcement. This is why affirmations alone rarely work. They attempt to override structure instead of transforming it. Bob Proctor called this structure a paradigm. Quantum science reveals it as a field of coherence. When the internal field is coherent, opportunities synchronize. When it is incoherent, life feels resistant. This resistance is not punishment. It is feedback. The law is neutral. It simply mirrors what is active within you. Money is one of the clearest mirrors. If money feels stressful, inconsistent, or elusive, it is not because money is scarce. It is because the internal relationship with value, safety, and expansion is unstable. Money amplifies whatever is present internally. If fear is present, money amplifies fear. If clarity is present, money amplifies freedom. This is why understanding the law changes everything. Understanding does not mean intellectual agreement. It means recognizing patterns in your own life. You begin to see how emotional states precede financial results, how decisions made from tension produce different outcomes than decisions made from calm certainty, how urgency creates delays while patience accelerates flow. The law rewards coherence with speed. Most people attempt to force results without stabilizing coherence. They push harder, hustle more, and consume endless information, believing effort alone will override misalignment. This creates exhaustion without leverage. Quantum law does not respond to exhaustion. It responds to clarity. Clarity is calm. Clarity is stable. Clarity is grounded. When clarity becomes your baseline state, action becomes effective. You stop scattering energy. You stop second-guessing progress. You stop sabotaging momentum unconsciously. Life begins to meet you halfway. This is not mysticism. It is mechanics. Quantum physics demonstrates that the observer participates in the outcome, not emotionally, but structurally. Observation carries expectation. Expectation conditions probability. Probability collapses into experience. This process is constant, automatic, and lawful. Your inner world is not private, it is communicative. Every belief about money, worth, safety, and possibility broadcasts into the field continuously. The field responds not by judgment, but by correspondence. Like attracts like, not at the level of desire, but at the level of identity. Identity is the deepest attractor. You do not attract money because you want it. You attract money because your identity allows it. If your self-concept includes struggle, money will come and go. If your self-concept includes instability, income will fluctuate. If your self-concept includes calm authority, prosperity stabilizes. This is why lasting change always requires identity evolution. Earl Nightingale understood this when he said we become what we think about most of the time. What we think about repeatedly becomes familiar. What is familiar becomes safe. What feels safe becomes normal. And what feels normal becomes reality. The law responds to normal. If scarcity feels normal, abundance feels threatening. If abundance feels normal, scarcity feels irrelevant. This is why the subconscious mind is central to wealth creation. The subconscious governs emotional thresholds. It decides what feels safe to receive, safe to keep, and safe to expand into. Until prosperity feels safe, the subconscious will quietly sabotage it. This sabotage is subtle. It appears as procrastination, as hesitation, as poor timing, as self-doubt disguised as logic. Quantum understanding reveals that these behaviors are not flaws. They are protective mechanisms. The subconscious protects identity. When identity expands, protection relaxes. The law does not ask you to fight yourself. It asks you to recondition yourself. This is done through repetition of calm success, regulated emotion, intentional interpretation of events, and consistent self-image reinforcement. Over time, the nervous system learns that expansion does not equal danger. When this learning stabilizes, resistance dissolves. Resistance is the true cause of lack. When resistance dissolves, money flows more freely. Not magically, but predictably. Decisions improve, relationships align, opportunities synchronize. You find yourself in the right place at the right time more often, not because you are lucky, but because you are coherent. Coherence collapses delay. This is the moment when people say life suddenly changed. In truth, life was always responding. The signal simply became clear. If this resonates with you, take a moment now to like this video, because conscious agreement strengthens subconscious receptivity. What follows in the next part is a deeper exploration of how this law operates through the subconscious mind, emotional regulation, and daily internal discipline. The practical mechanics that transform understanding into permanent prosperity. As this understanding deepens, a subtle but powerful shift begins to occur. You stop asking whether prosperity is possible for you and start observing how you internally relate to possibility itself. This is where the law becomes personal, not theoretical, not motivational, practical. You begin to notice that your emotional response to money matters far more than the circumstances themselves. Two people can face the same financial situation and experience completely different realities depending on their internal regulation. One feels overwhelmed and reactive. The other feels composed and deliberate. The law responds differently to each state, even if the external facts are identical. This is because emotion is not merely a reaction. Emotion is information. It informs the subconscious about meaning. And meaning shapes expectation. Expectation directs behavior. Behavior produces results. The entire cycle originates internally. Most people attempt to change the cycle at the level of action, skipping the deeper layers. They try to behave confidently without feeling secure. They try to invest boldly while emotionally bracing for loss. They try to grow while internally preparing to retreat. These mixed signals dilute outcomes. The quantum law is precise. It does not respond to contradiction. Precision begins with emotional honesty. You must be willing to observe what you truly feel about money without judgment, not what you wish you felt, not what sounds spiritual. What is actually present? Fear, tension, guilt, urgency, doubt. These are not enemies. They are indicators. Indicators point to conditioning. Once conditioning is acknowledged, it can be recalibrated. This recalibration does not happen through force or denial. It happens through consistent exposure to regulated states. When you repeatedly engage money-related thoughts and actions from a calm nervous system, the subconscious begins to update its reference points. Safety expands. As safety expands, self-sabotage diminishes. You stop rushing decisions. You stop overcompensating. You stop underpricing yourself energetically and materially. You begin to act from sufficiency rather than survival. This is one of the most important shifts governed by the law. Survival consciousness compresses time. Everything feels urgent. Prosperity consciousness expands time. Everything feels manageable. The law responds more efficiently to expanded time perception because expanded time reduces interference. Interference always comes from urgency. Urgency is fear of insufficiency projected into the future. When urgency dissolves, clarity emerges, and clarity refines choice. Refined choice multiplies outcome. This is how the law transforms daily experience, not just large events. Another critical realization is that prosperity is cumulative. It compounds internally before it compounds externally. You cannot expect external compounding without internal consistency. Sporadic alignment produces sporadic results. Stable alignment produces stability. This is why daily internal habits matter more than dramatic moments of inspiration. Inspiration fades. Conditioning remains. Quantum law favors what is repeated. What you repeatedly return to emotionally becomes your dominant signal. This is why Nightingale emphasized disciplined thinking. This is why Proctor emphasized repetition and emotional involvement. They were describing the same mechanism from different angles. Repetition with emotion installs identity. Identity governs behavior automatically. When your identity shifts from someone trying to succeed to someone who expects coherence, everything changes. You no longer chase money. You allow money to meet you where you are aligned. Allowance is not weakness. It is confidence without tension. At this level, you begin to understand why comparison is destructive. Comparison destabilizes identity. It shifts attention outward and fractures internal alignment. The law responds immediately to this fracture by slowing flow. Prosperity requires internal sovereignty. Sovereignty means you govern your internal state regardless of external fluctuation. You do not collapse emotionally when numbers dip. You do not inflate emotionally when numbers rise. You remain regulated. Regulation stabilizes signal. Stable signal sustains flow. This is how wealth becomes durable. As this continues, you may notice resistance arising, not externally, but internally. Old beliefs surface. Old narratives whisper doubts. This is not regression, it is integration. The subconscious releases what is no longer congruent when a higher structure forms. Do not fight this phase. Observe it. Observation without reaction dissolves conditioning faster than effort ever could. The law responds to neutrality with speed. Neutrality is not indifference. It is grounded awareness. Grounded awareness allows insight. Insight reveals patterns. Patterns reveal leverage points. Leverage multiplies results with minimal force. This is why mastery feels effortless from the outside. At this stage, you begin to trust yourself differently. Not because you believe everything will work out, but because you trust your capacity to respond coherently. This trust stabilizes identity. Stabilized identity stabilizes results. Money stops being emotionally charged. It becomes informational. Information can be managed calmly. Emotion distorts management. When money becomes informational, decisions become strategic instead of reactive. Strategy is long-term. Reaction is short-term. The law rewards long-term coherence. This is the deeper freedom prosperity offers. Freedom is not excess. Freedom is absence of fear. As fear dissolves, creativity emerges. Creativity attracts value. Value attracts compensation. Compensation reinforces confidence. Confidence stabilizes identity. This virtuous cycle is the lived expression of the law, and once this cycle is active, lack loses its authority. Not because money is guaranteed, but because internal order is. External fluctuations no longer define you. You remain centered. Centered people attract support. Support is a response to coherence. This is why understanding this law removes desperation from the pursuit of money. Desperation blocks reception. Calm invites participation. The law is not impressed by intensity. It responds to consistency. Consistency of inner state is the true secret. And once this is understood, you stop searching endlessly for techniques and begin cultivating alignment as a way of life. This is the foundation upon which everything else rests. Once the law is recognized, the next phase is understanding how deeply it operates through the subconscious mind. This is where most people lose momentum, not because the law stops working, but because they underestimate the power of internal conditioning. Conscious intention may initiate change, but subconscious acceptance determines whether change is sustained. The subconscious mind does not reason. It does not debate. It accepts patterns through repetition, emotional intensity, and familiarity. Whatever feels familiar becomes normal. Whatever is normal becomes expected. And whatever is expected becomes lived experience. This mechanism operates continuously, regardless of whether a person is aware of it or not. This is why understanding the law intellectually is never enough. Many people understand abundance concepts, read books, watch videos, and even agree with the principles, yet their financial reality remains unchanged. The reason is simple. The subconscious has not been reconditioned. Knowledge without integration changes nothing. Integration requires repetition and emotional congruence. Bob Proctor emphasized that paradigms are formed through habitual thought combined with emotion. Quantum understanding adds that emotion is not just psychological. It is energetic. Emotion organizes the body, regulates the nervous system, and defines what the subconscious perceives as safe or unsafe. Safety is the hidden gatekeeper of prosperity. If growth feels unsafe, the subconscious will quietly block it. Not through obvious resistance, but through subtle misalignment. Missed opportunities, poor timing, distraction, fatigue, doubt that feels logical. These are not failures of discipline. They are expressions of protection. The law respects protection. It will not force prosperity into a system that interprets expansion as danger. Instead, it mirrors the internal state faithfully. When fear is dominant, results contract. When regulation is dominant, results expand. This is why emotional regulation is not optional in wealth creation. It is foundational. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feeling. It means learning how to remain present without being hijacked. When a person can feel uncertainty without collapsing, disappointment without identity damage, and excitement without impulsiveness, coherence stabilizes. Stability sends a clean signal. The quantum field responds to clean signals faster than to intense ones. Intensity without stability creates distortion. Stability without intensity creates durability. Prosperity requires durability. This is where daily internal habits become more important than dramatic moments of motivation. The law does not respond to what you do occasionally. It responds to what you repeatedly return to. What you repeatedly return to emotionally becomes your baseline. And baseline state determines signal. If your baseline is worry, reality echoes instability. If your baseline is urgency, reality echoes delay. If your baseline is calm expectation, reality reorganizes with support. This is not poetic language, it is observable. When people begin regulating their internal state consistently, they often report unexpected changes. Conversations open doors. Opportunities appear through indirect channels. Solutions arrive before problems escalate. These are not coincidences. They are the external reflections of reduced interference. Interference always comes from internal contradiction. Contradiction weakens manifestation because it splits energy. One part of the mind moves forward while another pulls back. The law responds to the stronger signal, which is almost always the emotional one. This is why fear overrides affirmation. Affirmations without emotional congruence are ignored by the law. To recondition the subconscious, repetition must occur in a regulated state. Calm repetition impresses deeper than frantic effort. This is why relaxed focus is more powerful than desperate action. Earl Nightingale understood this intuitively when he emphasized disciplined, calm thinking. He was not advocating force, he was advocating consistency. Consistency is how the subconscious learns what to accept as true. Once acceptance occurs, behavior changes automatically. This is the most important realization of this block. You do not change behavior directly. Behavior changes as a side effect of identity shift. Identity shifts as a side effect of subconscious reconditioning. Reconditioning occurs through repeated, regulated exposure to new states of being. This is the mechanism. When your subconscious begins to accept prosperity as safe and normal, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop second-guessing opportunities. You stop underestimating your capacity. You move with quiet certainty. And certainty is magnetic. Certainty does not need proof. It generates proof. This is why people who are internally aligned often appear confident without arrogance. Their confidence is not performative. It is structural. It comes from internal agreement. Internal agreement eliminates resistance. As resistance dissolves, time perception changes. Things no longer feel delayed. Patience replaces urgency, and patience accelerates manifestation because it keeps the signal clean. The law is sensitive to impatience. Impatience communicates lack. Patience communicates trust. Trust is alignment with sufficiency. When sufficiency becomes internal, money responds accordingly. Not always immediately, but reliably. The law does not rush. It reorganizes. This reorganization often requires releasing old narratives. Stories about money being hard, success being rare, or struggle being noble. These narratives are emotionally charged and deeply embedded. They must be observed without attachment. Attachment preserves paradigms. Observation dissolves them. As paradigms dissolve, you may feel temporarily unanchored. This is not instability. It is transition. The old identity is loosening before the new one fully stabilizes. The law supports this phase by slowing external change while internal integration completes. Do not interpret this pause as failure. It is calibration. Calibration always precedes expansion. Once calibration completes, movement resumes with greater coherence. Actions feel more deliberate. Decisions feel cleaner. Energy is conserved instead of scattered. This conservation creates momentum. Momentum is not speed. It is direction with stability. This is how prosperity becomes repeatable. And this is why understanding the law at the subconscious level is non-negotiable. Without it, effort cycles endlessly. With it, effort becomes strategic and minimal. This block lays the internal foundation. What follows next is the practical application. How daily thoughts, emotional responses, and self-concept choices either reinforce alignment or reintroduce interference. Once the law is recognized, the next phase is understanding how deeply it operates through the subconscious mind. This is where most people lose momentum, not because the law stops working, but because they underestimate the power of internal conditioning. Conscious intention may initiate change, but subconscious acceptance determines whether change is sustained. The subconscious mind does not reason. It does not debate. It accepts patterns through repetition, emotional intensity, and familiarity. Whatever feels familiar becomes normal. Whatever is normal becomes expected. And whatever is expected becomes lived experience. This mechanism operates continuously, regardless of whether a person is aware of it or not. This is why understanding the law intellectually is never enough. Many people understand abundance concepts, read books, watch videos, and even agree with the principles, yet their financial reality remains unchanged. The reason is simple. The subconscious has not been reconditioned. Knowledge without integration changes nothing. Integration requires repetition and emotional congruence. Bob Proctor emphasized that paradigms are formed through habitual thought combined with emotion. Quantum understanding adds that emotion is not just psychological. It is energetic. Emotion organizes the body, regulates the nervous system, and defines what the subconscious perceives as safe or unsafe. Safety is the hidden gatekeeper of prosperity. If growth feels unsafe, the subconscious will quietly block it, not through obvious resistance but through subtle misalignment. Missed opportunities, poor timing, distraction, fatigue, doubt that feels logical. These are not failures of discipline. They are expressions of protection. The law respects protection. It will not force prosperity into a system that interprets expansion as danger. Instead, it mirrors the internal state faithfully. When fear is dominant, results contract. When regulation is dominant, results expand. This is why emotional regulation is not optional in wealth creation. It is foundational. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feeling. It means learning how to remain present without being hijacked. When a person can feel uncertainty without collapsing, disappointment without identity damage, and excitement without impulsiveness, coherence stabilizes. Stability sends a clean signal. The quantum field responds to clean signals faster than to intense ones. Intensity without stability creates distortion. Stability without intensity creates durability. Prosperity requires durability. This is where daily internal habits become more important than dramatic moments of motivation. The law does not respond to what you do occasionally. It responds to what you repeatedly return to. What you repeatedly return to emotionally becomes your baseline, and baseline state determines signal. If your baseline is worry, reality echoes instability. If your baseline is urgency, reality echoes delay. If your baseline is calm expectation, reality reorganizes with support. This is not poetic language. It is observable. When people begin regulating their internal state consistently, they often report unexpected changes. Conversations open doors. Opportunities appear through indirect channels. Solutions arrive before problems escalate. These are not coincidences. They are the external reflections of reduced interference. Interference always comes from internal contradiction. Contradiction weakens manifestation because it splits energy. One part of the mind moves forward, while another pulls back. The law responds to the stronger signal, which is almost always the emotional one. This is why fear overrides affirmation. Affirmations without emotional congruence are ignored by the law. To recondition the subconscious, repetition must occur in a regulated state. Calm repetition impresses deeper than frantic effort. This is why relaxed focus is more powerful than desperate action. Earl Nightingale understood this intuitively when he emphasized disciplined, calm thinking. He was not advocating force. He was advocating consistency. Consistency is how the subconscious learns what to accept as true. Once acceptance occurs, behavior changes automatically. This is the most important realization of this block. You do not change behavior directly. Behavior changes as a side effect of identity shift. Identity shifts as a side effect of subconscious reconditioning. Reconditioning occurs through repeated, regulated exposure to new states of being. This is the mechanism. When your subconscious begins to accept prosperity as safe and normal, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop second-guessing opportunities. You stop underestimating your capacity. You move with quiet certainty. And certainty is magnetic. Certainty does not need proof. It generates proof. This is why people who are internally aligned often appear confident without arrogance. Their confidence is not performative. It is structural. It comes from internal agreement. Internal agreement eliminates resistance. As resistance dissolves, time perception changes. Things no longer feel delayed. Patience replaces urgency, and patience accelerates manifestation because it keeps the signal clean. The law is sensitive to impatience. Impatience communicates lack. Patience communicates trust. Trust is alignment with sufficiency. When sufficiency becomes internal, money responds accordingly. Not always immediately, but reliably. The law does not rush. It reorganizes. This reorganization often requires releasing old narratives. Stories about money being hard, success being rare, or struggle being noble. These narratives are emotionally charged and deeply embedded. They must be observed without attachment. Attachment preserves paradigms. Observation dissolves them. As paradigms dissolve, you may feel temporarily unanchored. This is not instability, it is transition. The old identity is loosening before the new one fully stabilizes. The law supports this phase by slowing external change while internal integration completes. Do not interpret this pause as failure. It is calibration. Calibration always precedes expansion. Once calibration completes, movement resumes with greater coherence. Actions feel more deliberate. Decisions feel cleaner. Energy is conserved instead of scattered. This conservation creates momentum. Momentum is not speed. It is direction with stability. This is how prosperity becomes repeatable. And this is why understanding the law at the subconscious level is non-negotiable. Without it, effort cycles endlessly. With it, effort becomes strategic and minimal. This block lays the internal foundation. What follows next is the practical application. How daily thoughts, emotional responses, and self-concept choices either reinforce alignment or reintroduce interference. At this level of understanding, the law begins to operate less as a concept and more as a lived experience. You stop thinking about alignment as something you must achieve and begin recognizing it as something you must maintain. This shift is subtle, yet it separates temporary financial improvement from permanent prosperity. Most people experience brief moments of alignment. They feel clear, confident, and grounded. During these moments, things flow. Decisions land correctly. Opportunities appear. Then, slowly, old emotional habits return. Doubt creeps in. Urgency resurfaces. Comparison sneaks back. The signal fragments again, and results slow. The law never changed. The state did. This is why consistency is the true discipline of prosperity. Not consistency of action alone, but consistency of internal posture. The quantum field responds to what is stable, not to what is intense. Stability creates predictability. Predictability creates trust. Trust creates cooperation. Cooperation is the hidden multiplier. When life begins cooperating with you, effort decreases and impact increases. This cooperation is not mystical favoritism. It is structural alignment. You are no longer fighting your own signal. The greatest enemy of this cooperation is unconscious reactivity. Reactivity is the automatic emotional response learned through past conditioning. It is fast, habitual, and usually invisible until its consequences appear. Reactivity collapses coherence instantly. It pulls you out of the present moment and into memory or anticipation. The law responds immediately by reflecting disorganization. This is why emotional mastery is central to quantum prosperity. Emotional mastery does not mean emotional suppression. It means emotional containment. You feel fully, but you do not act compulsively. You observe sensation before interpreting meaning. This pause preserves coherence. That pause is power. Within that pause, choice becomes possible. And choice is where identity evolves. Every time you choose response over reaction, you reinforce a new self-image. That self-image slowly replaces the old one. The law responds to this identity shift with corresponding results. Identity is not declared. It is practiced. Most people attempt to upgrade identity through affirmations or declarations without changing emotional behavior. This creates dissonance. The subconscious rejects dissonance. It trusts behavior more than language. Behavior rooted in regulation reprograms identity. As identity stabilizes, self-trust grows. You no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer question every decision. You begin to trust your internal calibration. This trust reduces hesitation. Reduced hesitation conserves energy. Conserved energy compounds. Compounding energy is what people perceive as momentum. Momentum is not speed. It is sustained direction without internal drag. Drag comes from doubt, fear, and internal negotiation. When drag disappears, progress feels smooth. This smoothness is alignment in motion. At this stage, money begins responding differently. Not dramatically at first, but consistently. Small gains stabilize. Income becomes more predictable. Expenses feel manageable. Stress reduces. This stability is the platform for expansion. Expansion without stability collapses. Stability invites expansion. This is why quantum law unfolds in phases. First, internal order, then external consistency, then growth. Skipping phases produces volatility. Volatility is a sign of misalignment, not bad luck. Another critical realization at this level is the relationship between self-worth and reception. Many people unconsciously limit income because they equate receiving with obligation, guilt, or loss of freedom. These associations are rarely conscious. They are learned emotionally. The law mirrors these associations faithfully. If receiving feels heavy, money feels heavy. If receiving feels unsafe, money feels unstable. If receiving feels natural, money circulates freely. This is why generosity must include generosity towards self. You cannot sustain prosperity if you secretly resent receiving it. The subconscious will block what it interprets as threatening. Threat perception governs financial ceilings. Raising financial ceilings requires emotional recalibration. You allow yourself to receive without justification. You allow success without apology. You allow ease without suspicion. Each allowance rewires expectation. Expectation shapes reality. As expectation shifts, you may notice resistance from external environments. People may question your changes. Old dynamics may destabilize. This is normal. Identity evolution disrupts familiar systems. The law does not protect comfort. It protects coherence. Remain coherent. Coherence does not require agreement. It requires internal alignment. When alignment remains intact, external resistance dissolves or reorganizes. Life adjusts to the new signal. This adjustment phase can feel uncomfortable if misinterpreted. Many people retreat here, mistaking discomfort for failure. In truth, it is integration. Integration always precedes embodiment. Embodied prosperity feels grounded. It does not announce itself. It does not rush. It does not seek validation. It operates quietly through consistent choice. Choice is the daily interface with the law. Every choice made from clarity reinforces alignment. Every choice made from fear reinforces fragmentation. The law responds impartially. Impartiality is freedom. When you accept that the law is neutral, you stop personalizing outcomes. You stop blaming yourself emotionally. You stop dramatizing setbacks. You analyze, adjust, and proceed. This emotional neutrality accelerates learning. Learning accelerates adaptation. Adaptation stabilizes prosperity. At this stage, you begin living proactively instead of reactively. You plan from sufficiency rather than scarcity. Planning from sufficiency opens creative pathways. Planning from scarcity narrows options. The law mirrors openness with opportunity. Opportunity often appears disguised as responsibility. More to manage, more to decide, more to hold. If identity is not prepared, opportunity feels overwhelming. If identity is aligned, opportunity feels energizing. This is why inner work always precedes outer success. Success without inner order magnifies chaos. Success with inner order magnifies freedom. As this understanding deepens, you realize that the law is not something you use. It is something you cooperate with. Cooperation replaces control. Control creates tension. Tension distorts signal. Release tension, and the law responds immediately. This is not a belief system. It is an operating system. And once installed internally, it governs results automatically. At this stage, the law begins expressing itself less through sudden change and more through sustained reorganization. What once felt like effort now feels like calibration. You are no longer pushing life forward. You are adjusting your internal signal so life reorganizes around it naturally. This is where most people misunderstand prosperity. They believe wealth is built through accumulation alone. But accumulation without coherence creates pressure. Pressure eventually demands release. This is why many people reach financial milestones, only to experience instability shortly after. The law is correcting imbalance. True prosperity is not accumulation, it is capacity. Capacity is the ability to hold, circulate, and expand resources without emotional distortion. Without capacity, increase creates stress. With capacity, increase creates freedom. Capacity is built internally first. The subconscious must feel safe with expansion. Safety does not come from numbers in a bank account. It comes from internal regulation. When regulation is stable, the subconscious stops scanning for threat. Energy previously used for defense becomes available for creation. Creation is the natural state of alignment. This is why aligned individuals often feel more creative, even if they are not artists. Creativity is simply the mind operating without fear. When fear recedes, insight flows. When insight flows, solutions appear. Solutions precede money. Money follows value. Value follows clarity. Clarity follows regulation. This sequence cannot be reversed sustainably. Trying to force money without building clarity creates volatility. Volatility is misinterpreted feedback. The law is never punishing. It is informing. Every unstable financial pattern points to an internal instability that has not yet been addressed. When addressed, patterns dissolve quietly. Quiet change is lasting change. At this phase, your relationship with time also transforms. Urgency dissolves. You stop racing invisible deadlines. You begin operating from patience without passivity. Patience is not waiting. It is acting without anxiety. Anxiety contaminates frequency. When anxiety is removed, decisions become cleaner. You choose based on alignment rather than pressure. These choices compound subtly but powerfully over time. Time becomes an ally. This is one of the most underestimated shifts in quantum prosperity. When you stop fighting time, time works for you. Long-term thinking becomes natural. You stop seeking shortcuts. You seek leverage. Leverage multiplies effort. Leverage comes from positioning, not force. You position yourself internally first. Emotional positioning precedes strategic positioning. When emotional posture is stable, strategy becomes obvious. Obvious strategies feel simple. Simple strategies feel boring. Boring strategies build wealth. The ego resists boredom because it seeks stimulation. The law, however, responds to consistency. Consistency outperforms intensity every time. Intensity burns out systems. Consistency builds them. As consistency deepens, self-image shifts again. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to become prosperous and start seeing yourself as someone who operates in prosperity. This is not arrogance. It is normalization. Normalization dissolves resistance. When prosperity is normalized internally, you stop sabotaging it unconsciously. You stop overcomplicating success. You stop questioning momentum. You allow things to work. Allowance is a powerful signal. Allowance tells the subconscious that expansion is safe. The subconscious responds by loosening control. When control loosens, flow increases. Control blocks flow. Flow multiplies results. This is why surrender is often misunderstood. Surrender is not giving up a responsibility. It is releasing emotional tension around outcomes. Responsibility remains. Tension disappears. Without tension, action becomes precise. Precision replaces effort. You do less, but it lands better. You speak fewer words, but they carry more weight. You make fewer moves, but they compound. This precision is a sign of maturity. Mature prosperity is quiet. It does not seek validation. It does not announce itself. It moves steadily, predictably, and sustainably. Sustainability is the true measure of wealth. At this level, generosity emerges naturally, not as obligation, but as overflow. Giving no longer feels like loss. It feels like circulation. Circulation keeps energy moving. Stagnation kills prosperity. Money that is hoarded emotionally stagnates. Money that circulates consciously multiplies. The law responds to circulation because circulation mirrors life itself. Life is movement. As you align with movement instead of control, opportunities begin arriving in more refined forms. Partnerships improve. Timing sharpens. Synchronicities increase. These are not coincidences. They are indicators of coherence. Coherence aligns perception. Aligned perception recognizes opportunity where others see noise. This recognition is not intellectual. It is intuitive. Intuition is pattern recognition without fear. Fear blocks intuition. Regulation restores it. This is why emotional mastery continues to be central even at higher levels of prosperity. Challenges do not disappear. They evolve. But you meet them from stability instead of survival. Survival thinking caps potential. Prosperity thinking expands it. As this block integrates, you may notice a final internal shift. Detachment from outcome. This does not reduce ambition. It purifies it. You want success without needing it to define you. Freedom from definition is liberation. When success no longer defines you, it stops controlling you. And when it stops controlling you, it becomes easier to achieve and sustain. This is one of the deepest paradoxes of the law. You receive more when you no longer cling. Clinging signals lack. Allowance signals abundance. The law mirrors signal, not desire. And once this is understood, prosperity stops being something you chase and becomes something you express. At this level of embodiment, prosperity is no longer something you think about frequently. It becomes the background condition of your life, rather than the foreground obsession. This shift alone changes everything. When something moves into the background, it stops consuming emotional energy. And what no longer consumes energy begins to multiply effortlessly. This is one of the most misunderstood phases of the law. People believe that staying focused on money keeps it flowing. In truth, excessive focus often signals fear of loss. Fear compresses awareness. Compressed awareness restricts perception. Restricted perception limits opportunity. The law responds to spaciousness. Spaciousness is an internal state where attention is not clenched. You are engaged but not gripping. You are committed but not attached. This state allows intelligence to flow through you rather than being forced by you. Forced intelligence creates resistance. When intelligence flows, action becomes intuitive. You know when to act and when to wait. You know when to speak and when silence carries more power. Timing becomes refined. Timing is everything in prosperity. Most missed opportunities are not missed because of lack of skill, but because of poor timing driven by emotional impatience. Impatience is the residue of scarcity conditioning. When scarcity dissolves, patience feels natural. Natural patience accelerates results. At this phase, you begin trusting processes instead of micromanaging outcomes. You still plan, you still execute, but you no longer obsess. Obsession is control disguised as diligence. The law does not reward obsession. It responds to coherence. Coherence simplifies complexity. As your internal state stabilizes further, your nervous system adapts to higher levels of responsibility. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. This expansion of capacity is critical. Without it, growth would trigger collapse. Capacity precedes scale. Scaling without capacity destabilizes systems. This applies to businesses, careers, relationships, and wealth. The law ensures balance by exposing any gap between external scale and internal readiness. When readiness matches scale, growth feels smooth. Smooth growth often goes unnoticed because it lacks drama. Drama is attractive to the ego, but destructive to sustainability. The most prosperous lives are often the least dramatic. Drama signals imbalance. As imbalance disappears, emotional reactions soften. You still feel disappointment, but it does not derail you. You still face challenges, but they do not define you. Resilience becomes quiet and reliable. Resilience is stored energy. Stored energy allows you to respond instead of react. Response creates learning. Reaction creates repetition. The law mirrors repetition until learning occurs. Learning completes loops. At this stage, old financial patterns may surface briefly, almost like echoes. This does not mean regression. It means integration. The subconscious is checking whether old triggers still have authority. Your response determines the outcome. If you react, the pattern persists. If you remain regulated, the pattern dissolves. This is how karma ends, not through effort, but through awareness. Awareness neutralizes unconscious momentum. With momentum neutralized, you gain freedom of direction. You choose paths consciously instead of following inherited scripts. This conscious choice is the true meaning of abundance. Abundance is choice. Choice requires clarity. Clarity requires stillness. Stillness is not inactivity, it is internal quiet. From quiet, precision emerges. Precision creates elegance. Elegant action wastes no energy. It aligns intention, timing, and execution. The law amplifies elegance because it mirrors efficiency. Efficiency attracts prosperity. This is why wealthy individuals often value simplicity. Not minimalism for aesthetics, but simplicity for leverage. Fewer distractions mean more focus. More focus means stronger signal. Stronger signal produces faster feedback. Feedback becomes instructive rather than emotional. You no longer interpret setbacks personally. You interpret them informationally. This emotional neutrality accelerates mastery. Mastery is emotional stability in motion. As mastery deepens, leadership emerges naturally. Leadership here is not authority over others, but authority over self. People feel this presence. Opportunities gravitate toward it. Presence is magnetic. Magnetism is not charisma. It is coherence felt externally. When inner alignment is strong, others sense reliability. Reliability attracts collaboration. Collaboration multiplies value. At this point, money often arrives through relationships, ideas, and systems rather than sheer effort. This is not luck. It is leverage activated by trust. Trust is earned internally first. When you trust yourself, others mirror that trust. The law mirrors internal trust as external opportunity. This is the quiet power behind influence. Influence without force is the hallmark of embodied prosperity. You no longer persuade aggressively. You invite alignment. Invitation is stronger than persuasion. As this block integrates, you may feel a subtle detachment from outcomes paired with increased effectiveness. This paradox signals maturity. You care deeply, but you are not emotionally entangled. Entanglement distorts frequency. Freedom restores it. At this stage, prosperity feels less like achievement and more like stewardship. You manage energy, time, and resources responsibly. Stewardship attracts longevity. Longevity is the ultimate success. The law favors what can be sustained. What can be sustained can be expanded. What is expanded responsibly becomes legacy. Legacy begins internally, and when prosperity becomes an internal legacy, the external world simply reflects it. At this stage of integration, prosperity no longer feels like something you are moving toward. It feels like something you are moving from. You are no longer chasing stability. You are operating from it. This distinction is subtle, but it completely changes how the law responds to you. When stability is internal, the external world becomes responsive. Responsiveness replaces resistance. Life answers faster. Opportunities appear with less effort. Problems resolve with fewer moves. This is not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer complicating it with internal friction. Friction always begins inside. As internal friction dissolves, attention sharpens. You become deeply present in each moment. Presence enhances perception. Enhanced perception reveals leverage points. Leverage points create disproportionate results. This is how quantum shifts actually occur. They are not dramatic explosions. They are precise realignments that change trajectory quietly but permanently. One internal adjustment can redirect an entire financial future. This is why the law prioritizes identity over action. Action without aligned identity produces temporary gains. Identity-aligned action produces exponential outcomes. The subconscious ensures this by reinforcing behaviors that feel congruent and resisting those that feel foreign. Congruence creates flow. When who you are and what you do are aligned, energy stops leaking. Leaks drain momentum. Momentum fuels consistency. Consistency compounds. Compounding is the true miracle. Most people look for miracles outside themselves. The law reveals miracles through internal order. Order creates predictability. Predictability builds trust. Trust attracts cooperation. Cooperation is abundance in motion. At this phase, your relationship with money becomes neutral. Money no longer carries emotional charge. It is no longer idolized or feared. It becomes a tool, useful, powerful, but not defining. Neutrality restores sovereignty. When money no longer defines you, it stops controlling you. Control dissolves, freedom expands, and paradoxically, money flows more easily. The law mirrors emotional neutrality with material stability. Stability allows planning without anxiety. You think long-term, you invest patiently, you act strategically, you stop gambling emotionally. Emotional gambling creates volatility. Volatility teaches lessons, but it is exhausting. Stability teaches mastery. Mastery is calm confidence expressed over time. As mastery stabilizes, your nervous system adapts to holding more responsibility, more influence, more resources. This adaptation is physiological, not just psychological. The body must feel safe with success. Without somatic safety, success triggers sabotage. With somatic safety, success feels natural. This is why relaxation is not laziness. It is preparation. Relaxation integrates expansion. Integrated expansion does not shock the system. It grows organically. Organic growth is resilient. Resilience is essential for long-term prosperity. At this stage, intuition becomes a primary guide. Not impulsive intuition, but regulated intuition. You sense timing, alignment, and risk without overanalysis. Overanalysis is fear pretending to be intelligence. True intelligence is quiet. Quiet intelligence recognizes patterns early. It sees shifts before they become obvious. It moves before urgency appears. This is why aligned individuals often seem lucky. Luck is coherence meeting timing. Timing responds to readiness. Readiness is internal. The law waits patiently until readiness stabilizes. Once readiness is present, acceleration occurs naturally. Acceleration without strain is the hallmark of alignment. As acceleration unfolds, you may notice a final ego resistance. The ego fears irrelevance. When life flows without struggle, the ego loses its narrative of effort and control. This resistance may appear as restlessness or doubt. Do not engage it. Restlessness is a signal that the old identity is dissolving. Allow it. The law requires space to install the new identity fully. Installation is quiet. Once installed, prosperity feels ordinary. This ordinariness is success. Extraordinary outcomes born from ordinary inner states. This is why true wealth often looks simple. Simplicity is the final refinement. At this level, your purpose clarifies. Purpose is not a grand mission. It is a stable direction. You know why you do what you do. You do not need to justify it. Justification is a sign of misalignment. Aligned purpose generates energy. Energy sustains effort. Sustained effort builds legacy. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what you live consistently. As this block integrates, you operate with quiet authority, not dominance, not control. Authority rooted in coherence. Coherence is felt. People trust you without knowing why. Systems respond to you efficiently. Resistance fades. This is the law in full cooperation, not as belief, not as technique, but as embodiment. And when embodiment is complete, prosperity stops being something you seek and becomes something you express effortlessly. At the final stage of this journey, something subtle yet profound becomes unmistakably clear. Prosperity was never something to be acquired. It was something to be remembered. Remembered not intellectually, but somatically. In the body, in the nervous system, in the quiet confidence with which you now move through life. This is the return to wholeness. When wholeness is restored internally, the illusion of separation dissolves. You no longer see yourself as separate from opportunity, from abundance, or from flow. Life is no longer something happening to you. It is something moving through you. This realization changes everything. Because once separation dissolves, struggle loses its meaning. Struggle was always an attempt to force reconnection. Now that connection is restored, effort transforms into expression. Expression is effortless power. At this level, the law no longer feels like a principle you apply. It feels like a rhythm you move with. You sense when to advance and when to pause. You sense when to speak and when silence carries more intelligence. You sense when to act decisively and when stillness is the most strategic move. This sensing is not mystical. It is regulated awareness. Awareness refined through coherence becomes wisdom. Wisdom is not knowledge accumulated over time. It is perception purified of fear. Fear was the final veil. As fear dissolves, trust emerges. Not blind optimism, but grounded trust in your ability to respond to whatever arises. This trust is the foundation of true abundance. When you trust yourself, you trust life. When you trust life, life mirrors that trust back to you. The law responds to trust with expansion. Expansion now feels natural, not dangerous. Growth no longer threatens identity, it confirms it. You are no longer afraid of becoming more because you no longer believe that more will cost you yourself. This is liberation. Liberation from proving. Liberation from chasing. Liberation from waiting for permission. Permission was always internal. Now action flows without internal debate. Decisions are made cleanly. Adjustments are made without self-judgment. You no longer collapse emotionally when things do not go as planned. You adapt. Adaptation is intelligence in motion. Motion guided by intelligence creates elegance. Elegant lives rarely look impressive from the outside at first glance. They feel steady, calm, ordered. But beneath that calm is immense power. Power conserved, directed, and expressed with precision. This is the power Earl Nightingale pointed to when he spoke of becoming what you think about. This is the power Bob Proctor revealed when he taught that vibration precedes form. They were describing the same truth from different angles. Thought establishes direction. Emotion fuels momentum. Identity stabilizes outcome. When all three align, the law operates flawlessly. At this stage, you no longer need constant reinforcement. The work has integrated. Prosperity is no longer fragile. It does not depend on motivation. It does not collapse under pressure. It does not disappear when circumstances change. It has become internal architecture. Internal architecture shapes external reality automatically. You no longer chase money. You create value. Money follows value. This sequence feels obvious now, almost simple. Simplicity is mastery. As mastery stabilizes, a final shift occurs. Contribution becomes natural, not as sacrifice, but as expression. You share insight. You share clarity. You share stability. Others feel it and recalibrate in your presence. This is influence without force. Influence rooted in coherence does not need persuasion. It transmits through being. This is the highest expression of prosperity. Not accumulation, but elevation. Elevation is contagious, and as you move forward from this place, life continues to expand. Not in chaos, not in extremes, but in harmony. Challenges will still appear, but they will no longer threaten your center. Success will still arrive, but it will no longer define you. You will remain grounded. Grounded people are unstoppable because they are not reactive. They are responsive. They are not hurried. They are precise. They are not fearful of loss because they know the source is internal. The source always was, and now that you are consciously connected to it, the law no longer needs to teach you through contrast. It can express itself through continuity. Continuity is the reward. This is the hidden power of the mind according to quantum law. Not domination of reality, but cooperation with it. Not control of circumstances, but mastery of self. And from that mastery, prosperity flows, quietly, steadily, inevitably.